What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are going to be doing a way too early 2025 NFL mock draft with trades. This is going to be using PFF standard draft order, so don't complain about the draft order. Don't worry, when I end up completing the deep dive series, which will be completed next week, I ended up pausing it because of all the cuts that are happening right now, and maybe a couple last second trades, like we saw Malik Willis go today for a 7th round pick. We're going to be picking back up, and this week's going to be awesome. We've already done so many of them, but it's going to determine how I end up ranking the draft order when it comes to the early parts of the year. So you guys will be seeing a custom draft order very soon. Super excited for that. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Below my face is my board. It is subject to change when we evaluate more players, but this is, the order based on the grades I've already given for the players I've graded in all 22 that you guys can check out videos on. All these players are featured in my videos already on the show. So that's something that has never happened before. And I wanted to make sure it happened this year. So super excited for that. Below that is all the great ways to get involved in the community. It's easy to access through the link tree. Twitter, Instagram, those are the two other spots that are the best to go for the socials. But most importantly, go check out the sponsor UnderDog Fantasy for the NFL season, for the NCAA season, even NCAA games, NFL games, MLB, NBA, WNBA, for Christ's sakes. They have so many offerings for you. I use the app as much as I think is reasonable. And for you, that reasonability might change, but I honestly think it does add a little bit more skin in the game. And I personally really do like it. So hopefully you will as well. But let's get right into this. I think that this is going to be a really fun one. I haven't done anything with trades so far because the draft order is pretty subject to change. But let's get into this. Let's have a good time. Starting out with the number 1 overall pick, the Carolina Panthers. I don't think Carolina will be at number 1. I'm just going to give you this little bit of a spoiler right there. But if they are sitting at number 1, I think this is a prime opportunity to try to trade out. And, you could see if maybe some teams want to move up for one of the star weapons at this point, because I don't think a quarterback ever in this class, unless Connor Wigman takes a massive step up and proves to be fully healthy, will be worth that number 1 overall selection. And I think a lot of people are starting to come to that consensus as well. The fact is, Carolina traded their 7th round linebacker in Michael Barrett, who I really liked, to be able to acquire a cornerback this year, and I believe Michael Jackson for a 1-year deal. So they're still going to be needing that corner 2 spot, and I'm pretty adamant on the fact that Will Johnson is by far the best player in the draft, and I think he's the best player I've studied guaranteed since Sauce Gardner. Sauce was just my dude. I ended up having him as generational grade, and I think Will Johnson might have graded out better. We'll see when the testing numbers come in whether that actually remains to be the case, but I do think this guy is genuinely special, and when you do have someone like J.C. Horn on that squad, and the defense needs to also be a focal point, I think this is a very smart way to anchor your draft. Yes, you could try to trade out and get multiple firsts, but most of the time, you'll be seeing the most value for a trade up for a quarterback, not really for many other positions. We don't have a top tier wide receiver. As much as I love Jaden Higgins at number 3, I'm not going to be drafting purely based on my board. I like to blend my opinions with reality. So just know it's not going to be a whole bunch of bullshit where, somebody who will probably be like a 3rd round pick ends up going in the 1st. Like maybe that'll be towards the back end where you could start having a little bit more fun with it. I'm not going to be toying with it too much though, because it's still, I want you guys to get a representative view of what it should be. And these are just my guys. Like that's why I have my board there for full transparency. So I don't have to tell you where guys are on my board or who I have as like my sleepers. So you guys can see that for yourselves. At number 2 for the New England Patriots, I think left tackle is going to be the biggest issue to address. Deep down, I always wanted Caden Wallace to kick to right guard, Owenu to be right tackle, and then you could develop from there. Of course, you actually are seeing Layden Robinson, even though he's penalty heavy, doing a really solid job this early in his career, which is awesome. So maybe Caden Wallace could be the left guard. That's just my personal opinion. I really love Caden Wallace as an interior offensive lineman. He was my guy as an interior offensive lineman. The left tackle spot, though, in my opinion, still needs to be addressed. The first guy who I have as a left tackle, you'll see Marcus Mabeau here. Still trying to reach out to him. We're going to see if we can get him on the show. But, if we can, that's going to be awesome. He is a right tackle. I'm not going to be doing this whole bunch of BS, switching right tackles to left tackles. And Marcus is already pretty low weight-wise anyways at 6'5", 305. Some people even think of him as a tweener for guard. He's awesome. We'll be bringing him up in the first round undoubtedly. I do think he's going to be a big riser. There's certain guys like that I'll be sticking my neck out for. Guys like Jaden Higgins, I doubt that. Like, they'll have the proper publicity to be able to gain the traction to be as high as that. But Will Campbell's the first one. It's Will Campbell, Jack Nelson. And both of them stand about 6'6", 6'7", and I think both are around that 312 to 315 range. So both of them are very well built. I'm a big fan. I don't even know where they have Jack Nelson at 113 on their board because PFF, I mean, hell, they had Cooper DeJean as like their number 6 player in the draft at the end of last year. So, they're also ones to be honest with their own opinion. I think Will Campbell is the likely option for them. He could end up kicking into guard because length concerns is a potential, but I think the only guy that so far has proven to be able to long arm Will Campbell is Dallas Turner. I don't know why Dallas fell so much. I think that's criminal. He was, if I'm not mistaken, he was my number 3 or 4 player in the class last year. And, when you're going up against somebody who I think is a blue chip edge rusher, it's okay to have some slip ups, right? So I really do like Will Campbell. He was able to hold up versus Darius Robinson, who had 34.5-inch arms. Like, my big concern initially was because Dallas Turner had his way with him for a full half. And that is something to note, but he is the best left tackle in the class at the moment. Of course, Jack Nelson, if he continues to develop, might be able to take that throne. But again, we're also talking about the most likely options here, and I think Will Campbell as a top 5 pick is far more likely. At number 3 for the Broncos, this is a potential trade out spot for them. They do probably need to acquire a bit more draft capital. They have their quarterback of the future. I really do like the direction that they are headed. That being said, I do feel quite comfortable actually sitting and staying and picking here. I love the idea of Will Johnson pairing up with Pat Surtain. And I think that the cornerback position is now being extremely heavily undervalued to the point where I think that maybe it's time for a rebound into that discussion where Ben Morrison, who is pretty heavily the number 2 best player in the class for me, should be selected. Denver could be trying to trade out here again, but remember, every time you want to trade out, someone has to want to trade up. And I don't see any teams desperate enough to try to trade up with, maybe a second and a third round pick, for example, to go after someone like Benjamin Morrison. I don't see anybody else, even as much as I love Nick Scourton. I think he is head and shoulders the edge one of the class at the moment. I don't really see teams being that needy out of an edge rusher, right? So I'm going to be going after Ben Morrison here. I think he's just a quality, aggressive, solidly built, and well-tested corner. He went up against the best of the best, even versus Marvin Harrison Jr., and he did a phenomenal job. Theoretically speaking, if I'm not mistaken, Ben Morrison did better than Will Johnson statistically. So good job on Ben Morrison. He is a really, really talented corner. These were the first 2 guys I watched of the entire class outside of the quarterback group, and I never looked back. They genuinely were that fantastic. So don't overthink it. Sometimes you just got to go after a really damn good player. But for a team like the Patriots, I mean, this class has a lot of depth at edge rusher. Fix the offensive line first. I mean, you saw what happened when there was that mess up. I think it was City Sow ended up running into Layden Robinson. It's like, man, I would rather have the defense have some issues than the offense, if I'm going to be blunt. If it is on the line, for example. And especially if there's a hole on offensive tackle, you have to address that ASAP. So hopefully maybe in free agency you can do that, but Will Campbell is far from a slouch for that. And number 4, though, Tennessee Titans. I do think Tennessee will be a little bit further down than at pick number 4. But if they are, I don't think it would be because of Will Levis. They have a really good receiving core. And I do think someone like Luther Burden could step into that Tyler Boyd role and do very well. I don't think it'd be worth it to select Luther Burden at this spot, though. Mason Graham pairing up with Jeffrey Simmons would be pretty nasty and very scary. However, I don't feel a need to go after that. I will be actually going after a need with actually really good positional value, and that is Nick Scourton here. This is the proper time to address edge rusher. Arden Key's, I do love Arden Key, but getting some extra rotation in there, and I think Nick will be the starter out of these guys. At 280 as well, you can use him pretty much anywhere. I think that is going to be extremely valuable. And as much as I wanted to, say you can get edge later, Nick Scourton, if you need an edge right now, and for example, you don't have a massive hole on the offensive line, which you could argue the Titans do. But for the Titans' sake, right tackle's much deeper than left. And I think that I would prefer to take my risk at right tackle in the second round than left tackle in the second. At pick number 5 for the New York Giants, quarterback is on the mind. And it might be Carson Beck. I mean, that just is the most logical solution for y'all. I do think that if we were to address other positions, I mean, you got to go after a QB at this point. That's where unfortunately, your hand is forced. Connor Wegman is the guy who I think has the highest potential, if healthy, to be selected here at 5. And I'm pretty sure these rankings are based off of Trevor Sikkema's, because if I'm not mistaken, I was remembering listening to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and they were talking about it in a pretty similar order, because I remember Graham Mertz was very high on Trev's list. So we'll keep that in mind. But I don't want to just go after Connor Wegman right here, unless I do believe that's the best option. I do think boundary corner, they were trying to target it with Kamari Lassiter and Kool-Aid McKinstry last year. And if you ended up watching that Hard Knocks, it was actually quite awesome. You get to see that they were certainly looking at that pure boundary position. Ended up getting Andrew Phillips, who's going to be probably more that nickel, which you might say, oh, that's such a bummer. Like, you want a boundary corner over a nickel. The nickel corners, they're facing some of the best receivers in the league. A lot of really talented wide receivers are starting to kick into the slot. It's no longer a spot for just an itty-bitty dude who can kind of be a little shifty. Some of the best receivers, they make it work in the slot, y'all. So I'll keep that in mind, but I really do think at the end of the day, if you're at number 5, the biggest reason why, and we all know it, is quarterback. Carson Beck is a very valiant option, but if you really want to swing for the fences and try to take a chance on someone who could be difference-making, Connor Wegman is the likely selection. At pick number 6 for the Commanders, offensive tackle, probably going to be a way that I want to lean. But also, if you want to lean edge rusher, both of those are very valid options. You could also go Luther Burden because, without Jahan Dotson, I do think there's a role for him. Now, it's not 1-to-1, right? Luther Burden's over 200 pounds, but there's certainly a vacancy that Luther can fill. I will be leaning towards the trenches, so we'll add an offensive tackle as well as edge rusher here and look at who is available. Now, for Dan Quinn, I do think he might lean more towards the defensive side of the ball. However, his time in Dallas did show that taking swings at offensive linemen early does pan out. You see Tyler Smith ended up working out really well. This year, you're watching Tyler Guyton work out really well. Now, what you want to do is address the offensive line in a way where you get a guaranteed hit. Now, Kelvin Banks is going to be a very solid option. It's a safe pick. I think that's a perfectly fine choice. I think left tackle is probably more valuable, and to me, I prefer to go after Jack Nelson at this point, but I just don't think it's very realistic. I think that people will be watching Texas and what they're facing far more than what Wisconsin faces. And I think there's going to be a little bit more of a focus on LSU and Texas. I do think that it's far more likely and far more realistic to go after Emory Jones or Kelvin Banks. And both of them theoretically could be guards, right? Kelvin Banks is 6'4". Emory Jones has shorter arms at, I believe, 33.7 inches. And a lot of people think he could kick in to guard. But Kelvin Banks is a true left tackle. Emory Jones is not. He's a true right tackle. You, of course, do have Brandon Coleman, but Brandon Coleman is a project. He was taken too early, in my opinion, and I liked Brandon Coleman. So I would rather let Brandon Coleman develop maybe it's a right tackle and take someone who I think is more of a guaranteed starter at left with Kelvin Banks, and I think the majority of y'all would agree. At 7 for the Cardinals, I'm going to do the right thing. Y'all have been telling me that you've been trying to force his hand for a while now. I'm going to go Mason Graham. Best defensive interior in the class. He might not be listed in my top 35, but I do think he is really, really awesome in the role that he's designed to play. And, for the Cardinals specifically, I think that he'd be graded far higher. I do a holistic grade when it comes to each of these players because, lo and behold, I talk about all the teams and all the schemes. So why would I make scheme-specific grades? Which I do have them, but Mason Graham specifically, if you're looking at someone who's going to be a high-end block shedder with elite pass rushing potential, that's your guy. that is your guy in this class. And I think that that is a great weapon for the Cardinals to add, especially with all the injuries that are starting to mount up on their defensive line. It's going to be super duper key, and they've been looking for some defensive interior help for a bit. We got to get some trades in here, though, but Mason Graham is by far that type of guy to address at 7. At pick number 8 for the Vikings, I do think that this is a spot where the Raiders are sitting here at 9. A quarterback is potentially likely for them at 9 as well. We do need to see some teams trying to get a little bit more aggressive, and especially for that top end of the, whether it's corner or else quarterback position, there are a lot of teams in here that might be looking for their answer at that position. And especially for corner, the Seahawks, if you're thinking about it, one of their boundary corner positions is not fully secured. So I do think that a team that might be trying to get aggressive and snagging a top tier corner could see the value in jumping up here. However, I do think quarterback is the position to target. Looking at the teams that are within striking range, I could see the Saints being a target here, but I'd rather develop Spencer Rattler. But you could also see, theoretically, that the Seahawks are in the market if they are at 10. I don't think they are. Check out my Seahawks deep dive. I'm far more positive on what they're going to do this year than what this suggests. However, if you are at pick 10, Geno is most likely not going to be one of the reasons you are going to be doing too well. And for the Vikings, getting a little bit farther back and still being able to address the exact same position, I think is a very beneficial move. Now, again, this is going to kill me because I don't think the Seahawks are this, in quotes, bad, right? However, we're looking at this based on, what if maybe I was completely wrong about what I believe the draft order is going to be, which again is the reason why I'm going to be doing my own draft order very soon. But like theoretically, what if I am wrong? And this is the way it is. Most likely, it's not going to be because the defense sucks. The defense is really solid. It's probably going to be because Geno has a regression step. He's getting older. I mean, that just happens, man. I mean, age is a real thing. We all deal with it. I mean, again, who am I to say I'm fucking 23 years old, right? But at the end of the day, you still get to see it around you that age is real. It's a real factor, man. So I will be having the Seahawks trade up, jumping the Raiders, and being able to select the quarterback of their choice. I don't want to go after Shedeur Sanders. I think Carson Beck is a very fine option, and based on his mobility, ability to throw on the run, and just ability to keep an offense in rhythm, it makes the most sense. And look at this. McDonald's Employee of the Year, DJ Uiagalelei. Absolute ass cheeks. But I do think the only other quarterback I would mention for the Seahawks specifically is my number 1 quarterback, Jalen Daniels from Kansas. I'm not going to be selecting him in the first round because of the injury history he has had in the recent time period. But, I mean, he's been starting since he's 17 years old. So he has a lot of experience under his belt. Carson Beck, though, will be that final quarterback most likely that I'll be taking in the first round. Leaving the Vegas Raiders at 9, I think Carson Beck would have been a fine option. You had Minshew for 1 extra year, but Beck brings a similar foundation that Minshew does that I think would be, you have it for 5 years, right? And I think you have bigger upside with Beck. So Beck is the guy who I support for the Raiders, not Shedeur Sanders. I'll just put that out there very clearly. Now, for the Raiders, I do think that there's a couple positions I'd love to address. Offensive tackle is one of them. I do think that right tackle spot still could be addressed. And I know we got Delmar Glaze in there, so, we'll see how that actually develops over an entire year. But personally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, if you wanted to wait, I think one of the coolest things you could do is pair up Jackson Powers-Johnson with one of his former tackles in Connor Lee or Cornelius. I don't think that's going to be something I do at pick 9, though. But if you were to neglect offensive tackle again, that would be the route I'd recommend going. I'm not going to neglect it. I want someone who is going to be a Raider. When I think of a Raider, I think of somebody who can absolutely pile drive. We're talking about seeing these clips of J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski going to town. I want to see Emory Jones absolutely sandblasting the defensive lineman in front of him. Or you could talk about Blake Miller. Or if you wanted to go left tackle, which doesn't make sense because, you got the left tackle figured out. Jack Nelson, still got to put him in there. And Marcus Mabeau, man. I don't think they're going to be going after Marcus because he's a little bit on the lighter side. You look at Jackson Powers-Johnson, he's going to be 25 pounds heavier than your right tackle on the inside. I don't really think that's going to be a way that y'all go. So that also discounts Blake Miller from the table. So I actually really like Emory Jones. I think he weighs 315. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. It's an extra 10 pounds that does make a difference. So I'll be going Emory Jones. He does bring that mentality that I really do love for this team. So I really do hope that ends up transpiring the way that it is supposed to. But at pick number 10 for the Minnesota Vikings, I do think that this is a prime opportunity since we traded back to still get a position of really solid value, like corner or even a third receiver like Luther Burden if you want to just go pedal to the metal on offense. But this class, you should be taking advantage of these corners who are very, very talented. And it honestly genuinely pisses me off that they don't have more corners here. Like, I have guys like Davison Igbenison, Ephesians Prysock, Azariah Thomas, for example, who are all guys who should be at least given a rank, or like you could just say like rank blank and ADP blank and just have them on here just so this is more of a better database. It's one of the big issues I have with PFF. Because I do think they deserve to at least be mentioned in this group. Of course, that's why I also include my board below my face. I think it really does matter for you guys to understand that there is a lot more players than what some of these mock draft simulators, the respectable one, which is PFF, have to offer. There's some that use a massive database, but they don't really actually give you a good picture of actually who's better than the other one and who's draft relevant, because let's just be honest, nobody on planet Earth has the time to go through that many prospects. You're pretty much going to have to bullshit on some of it or just randomize it. But I digress. I think Travis Hunter is going to be the selection here. He is very long-armed, solid frame except for the size. It's like you can add some weight. You can see that. You could add some frame to him. But you could even use him as a receiver. You got that extra third-round pick as well. Like, for me, his athleticism is slightly limited, but at the same time, it's not bad by any stretch. It's just you're not seeing eye-popping numbers. There's some guys in this class, like Maxwell Harrison, for example, Kobe Bryant, as well as several other players that have even better physicality and is on top of their overall athleticism. But Travis Hunter, he is a super high IQ. He can be physical when he wants to. And he's not going to be playing every single rep as a receiver. So we've never seen a Travis Hunter with a full tank of gas. And I'd be very excited for him to help out the Vikings here. At pick number 11 for the New Orleans Saints, I think wide receiver could certainly be in the market. You know, you guys have been testing it out, and you got some really, really good, in quotes, value options. I like Bub Means, love A.T. Perry, but we have yet to get a true wide receiver one, in my opinion. You could look at Tetairoa McMillan for that 6'5", 215 frame. Now, you guys will know Tetairoa is my wide receiver 24. But if you ever actually watch the video, there's something that I like to mention, that as a possession receiver is somebody who doesn't need to cover all bases because he's not a good route runner and he's not going to separate, especially with route running. This guy is a top 10 receiver in the class easily. And in a role where you kind of have pretty much all of those bases covered and you're looking for someone to be almost Mike Evans-y, Tetairoa might be the best receiver for you. So this is a very role-specific receiver, but it's one that definitely deserves some legitimate thought here. Now, this is also a good opportunity to potentially trade out. I do think edge rusher is something that is going to be on the market for them as well. But there's also not a ton of receivers that bring that physical profile that Tetairoa does. And I do think that teams, especially one that's seen Mike Evans every year, will be valuing the skill set that Tetairoa brings to the table. At pick number 12, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Tampa Bay, if they're here, it's because their defense, not their offense. I continue saying that, and I will continue to say that. I think corner is going to be the position that lets them down the most, or it's going to be edge rusher. Looking at those who are the best value and looking at my board, yes, my board is going to be a little bit more wonky compared to that. But realistically, we are talking about Denzel Burke here. And Denzel Burke is a phenomenal option. Phenomenal option. He is literally Mr. I do every single thing well. And he only had a slip up in his sophomore year, to which he ended up rebounding and being really damn good at the end of it. So for me, I always love giving respect to those who end up rebounding even in the face of failure. So continuing on, pick 13, another team that could easily use a corner. But I just don't really think that the value of corner needs to be pushed at this point when you look at that safety core. I mean, you released Ronnie Harrison, who, I mean, he'll probably be back on practice squad, or he should be signed to another roster. I highly doubt that he ends up on his practice squad long term. But safety core certainly still needs an alpha there. And I love Malachi Starks. He's pretty much able to play anywhere. And theoretically, when Kenny Moore decides to hang up the cleats, he's not a spring chicken. You could kick Malachi to the slot. He's really, really talented and multi-positional. I really have a lot of faith in this guy. So we're going to be going after Malachi Starks because I don't want to just continue to be that guy who takes a billion corners early on. At pick 14 for the Steelers, now it kind of feels like Luther Burden could be a semi-wise option. However, I trust my Steelers to be able to draft receiver talent down the board. It's just what they do. That's how we've drafted AB there. We drafted Juju past the first. We drafted George Pickens past the first. Deontay Johnson. The majority of our top-end receiver talent, if not all of it, has not been in the first round. And you can't say it's because we didn't need receiver talent. Second-round picks still say we need receiver talent. It's just we know what we're doing. And I'm proud to say that, you can trust this scouting department to get solid value at receiver after the first round. Now, the other positions we need to address, because I'm a Steelers fan, that's why I say we. Corner 2, unless you want to give Dante Jackson another deal, that is something to address. And we'll see if Troy Fautanu can last with his knee, because unfortunately he's out for the entire preseason with a knee injury. Started out and looked pretty solid. He ended up getting humbled quickly by Danielle Hunter, but wouldn't pretty much every rookie offensive tackle. We will be seeing a lot of good stuff from Troy Fautanu, I'm sure. I do worry that he could end up kicking into guard if need be, because James Daniels will be gone. Most likely. I mean, I think it's wise, especially with the amount of money you have to shell out for interior offensive linemen at this point, that's probably a position that we will need to address eventually. And I do think if you want to move back, that's not a bad idea. However, I do think corner is the most likely selection for the Steelers. And change of direction-wise, Tacario Davis is not up there with the best of the best. I do think he has some struggles in terms of shifting direction from north to south. But at the same time, he is unbelievably smart. And that's what I love most about Joey Porter Jr. when he came out. He had really good length. He had really good size. He had great press ability. And, I think that, the athleticism overall was there. And I think that the IQ was what really stood out with JPJ. The IQ stands out with Tacario Davis. So I'm going to be giving Tacario the nod here over some of the other corners that I do think are better, because I think it complements what we are looking for in a number 2 for the long run. And theoretically, if Tacario sucks, let's just say, the change of direction just isn't good enough for a down-to-down corner, this guy's going to be an elite safety, and we need one of those. We do. Next to Minka, we do need one of those, and Tacario could easily become that. So we're getting a multifaceted player there as well. The Rams at 15, Luther Burden's screaming like the Rams, because they always draft best player available over what I personally think they'll probably need. But at the same time, I do think this is a team that should be focusing on the long-term answer to left tackle. And I am going to deploy my Jack Nelson card here. 6'7", over, not Xavier Truss. Fuck that. I do not like Xavier Truss that much. But 6'7", 315, 316 technically. Just super reliable. But what I really love about Jack is that I didn't love him before. And it's his development that's really made me a believer in him. Even in game, I've seen him make adjustments for where he has his failures, but I've yet to see many offensive tackles in my years of scouting be able to absolutely stonewall NFL level edge rushers. And maybe he doesn't do it on an every down basis, but he shows the propensity and the potential to do so. So I think that Jack Nelson is going to be a solid foundational piece for the offensive line of the Los Angeles Rams. And I do think that potentially if we do see the departure of Sean McVay, most front offices that are brand new like to be a little bit more conservative. So going after an offensive lineman is also more conservative. Jacksonville Jaguars. I wish I could go Luther Burden here. And theoretically, I could move out of this spot. Corner is the position I want to target the most. Jack Nelson would have been the other guy who I wanted to target. So I will be making a move out of here because I think Luther Burden needs to be selected. And I'm looking at a couple teams here that could be in the market for someone like Luther. And to be fair, they're pretty far away. I'm looking at the Cowboys, though. Theoretically, they just gave a nice deal to CD today, finally, right? They could be in the market to move up and select the top tier weapon. And I mean, I do think he complements the game of CD. And theoretically, if you want to keep Brandon Cooks there, Brandon Cooks as well. But I think he complements CD very well if you want to use Luther on the boundary, because Luther can play both. And CD is not just a conventional slot. CD is that top end player in the slot like I was talking about. However, I just don't know if they're going to pull the trigger on that far of a move. And I don't think they're that desperate to go after a receiver at this point. So again, you have to look at who's available, who's worth it. But for the Jaguars at this spot, I do think offensive tackle is not out of the realm of possibility. And I'm looking at Marcus Mabeau at this spot at 16. I feel comfortable potentially taking him here. And this is a squad that could potentially kick Anton Harrison to right or to left tackle, because that's also where he has played before. And I think that's a smart move. So we are going to be using a placeholder here because, of course, PFF doesn't have it in their database. We love that, don't we? And I'm going to let it be Ernest Green, because Ernest is not going to be getting very many high ADP selections for the near future. So this is a placeholder. I want to re-emphasize that. It's my number 7 player in the draft, Marcus Mabeau. It might be Embo. I'm not sure. I'm not the best at pronunciating names that are actually really cool like that. But for the time being, we're going to be calling him that. And Marcus is awesome. Right tackle, 6'5", 305 pounds. A little bit on the lighter side, but elite hand technician. Already made a video about it, so you guys can go check it out. At 17 for the Cleveland Browns, this is where I might be seeing a quarterback go. And I think it is. Shedeur Sanders gets a lot of hype. And I think there's one particular spot that might be willing to take the risk. And it's probably Cleveland. So we're going to be going after Shedeur Sanders here. Some people might say, oh, what are the risks? I mean, it's the factor that he's not a very athletic quarterback. It's not that he's unathletic, but you can't point at Shedeur Sanders and say, like, that's an actual plus athlete in the NFL. I also think that his arm is not a plus arm in the NFL. His processor is the best processor in the class at the moment, but there's also a lot of really developmental quarterbacks, so that bar is also lower. He's one of the few quarterbacks in this class to throw with anticipation, which is a big plus for his game. And he also does not really love to put the ball in harm's way. He's also in an offense that is structured for him to try to take sacks rather than throwing incompletions. Something I did not appreciate about that, but also his offensive line's absolute ass cheeks. So it's not like you're going to be throwing a really good ball for an incompletion anyways. There's a lot of pluses and minuses there, but the biggest plus or the biggest minus in my opinion is the factor that, you know, there is going to be a sense of entitlement. There just is. And, you know, it might not live up to the talent level. Now, he is not untalented. He's a talented quarterback, but we're talking about someone who would probably get really pissed off at the fact that he would not be the number 1 quarterback selected or not the number 1 player. When someone has that level of entitlement without the production, right? I think they got 4 wins last year. That's where I start getting concerned. It's not like, hey, I made a playoff push and then now I'm still not looked at. Like, okay, you should be trying to have that type of mental fortitude to believe you're the best of the best, right? You have to at least fake it till you make it. But when you don't have the production at the level that you should, and again, there's a lot of other factors for it, but you haven't earned that right to be able to say, I am the number 1. But continuing on, for the Bears at number 18, I mean, I kind of want to have an embarrassment of riches by going Luther Burden. It is best player available, and I think this is the team that would be most beneficial by selecting Luther Burden, at least in this next 4-pick range. Now, again, I could see a team like Dallas trying to move up here. This is good range for them. The Atlanta Falcons also could try to make a move. And for the Bears, I mean, you might just find a lot more value in moving back and selecting a top tier edge rusher that's on the board. I wouldn't blame you. And if you're looking at teams that would probably need an edge rusher, I wouldn't really suggest the Chargers would be the team to go after an edge rusher. I don't think the Jets are, or for that matter, I don't think the Texans are. So I think this is a really safe move overall. So I know it sucks to lose Luther Burden, but I also did that in my last mock draft. And I said this one's going to be with trades. And you know that Poles does his work. So we're going to be moving back. I mean, Atlanta has, god damn. What the hell happened to all your picks? Hello. This is going to be a great opportunity to actually move up in the draft. It's going to kind of suck for Atlanta to do this, but I do think that if you can end up flipping some of these picks and looking at the value, like you guys can adjust this. It's only a 1-round mock draft, so maybe you could toss in 154 for that matter, and then maybe get 236 back. I don't know. You guys can calculate the back end of that, but I do think that if the Bears can acquire an extra second-round pick while being able to still give the Falcons quantity-wise an increase, like that is going to be beneficial for both Atlanta and Chicago, because Atlanta, you don't need that much more. You've shown the ability to go out and get what you want. And so I'm going to believe in this front office to go out and get what they freaking want. And that's Luther Burden, superstar receiver out of Missouri, who complements Drake London extremely well and adds a new, pretty much the Jordan Addison there for Kirk Cousins. Or you could talk about Michael Penix, but regardless, for your quarterback of the future. At pick 19, again, yeah, we also had the Cowboys that were going to be lurking there, so you do need to go up and get it. 19 for the Chargers. You know, weapons. It's another team that could have gone after Luther, but you would have to be pushing him to the outside. I do think Alec Io-Maynor could be a guy you do try to target here. And I do think that you still have yet to acquire a wide receiver one. Colson Loveland still is in the equation here because at 19, it's okay. It's okay to take him. I also think you guys will be picking earlier than this, but we'll leave that comment for later in the year when I end up doing my own board. So, or when I do my own draft rankings. So I'll be talking about Colson Loveland primarily at this spot. Kenneth Grant needs to be mentioned here as well because defensive interior still is a position the Chargers, I don't think, have answered. And you could be getting instant chemistry right here with not only your new linebacker, Junior Colson, but also the actual defensive coordinator. I love Colson Loveland, but defensive interior has far higher value than tight end unless tight end hits big. There's a lot of really solid tight ends in the NFL. You have to hit big. I do think Colson Loveland could hit big, though. Kenneth Grant brings a lot of pass rushing presence. He's a very unique talent who will be going within the next 2 picks. So the question is, do I want to make my life harder for the Texans, or do I just want to go with the cute storyline and also a position I think the Chargers desperately need? So I'm actually going to go after a position where I think, you know, again, tight end's not very valuable unless you hit big. I think they're going to hit big with Colson Loveland here. Theoretically, he could also play boundary receiver. At 20, though, for the Texans, I already spoiled what I'm going to do. Defensive interior is what's up. I mean, I don't know why they ended up getting rid of, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, but the defensive interior that you sent, I think Malik Collins, to the Niners, but you sent him for pretty much nothing, and the dude's balling out. I think it's time to rectify that mistake, and we're going to get Kenneth Grant here at 340 pounds as an elite pass rusher. That's very hard to find, so I think I want to be fortifying our defensive front with that. At 21 for the New York Jets, a potential trade out spot nonetheless, but I do think you could try to get a little bit unique here with Harold Perkins. Now, we've seen a lot of issues with, so far, Hassan Reddick trying to hold out and be a big pain in the ass. He's going to be taking some big fines if he ends up really wanting to put, pen to paper, or not put pen to paper for that matter. I do think Harold Perkins could be someone who has that high upside that you're willing to take, kind of just that best player available. Now, looking back at my board, we still obviously have some really, really good players on the board like Jack Kaiser, who I have a ton of faith in. I don't think that style of linebacker would be worth this pick. However, both of your starting tackles are on 1-year deals, if I'm not mistaken. And they're also older. Like, that's the key thing. They're older. They're not healthy. Or they're not consistently healthy for that matter. So I do think this is the prime opportunity to get Olu Fashanu a running mate for the future. And I think the smartest move would be to go after the next best right tackle, and that's Blake Miller. Now, what you could do if you wanted to really go balls to the wall, which I don't think would be a bad idea, is go Jaden Roberts here, right guard of Alabama, and say, I'm moving this kid to right tackle. He has tackle length. He's the strongest player in the weight room for Alabama. I think that would be, if I'm just going to say, screw it, I'm going to test this out, that's what I'm going to do. Blake Miller is far more safe of a bet. And I do think with Aaron Rodgers being there, they're going to be more safe. But I really want to throw out the idea of going balls to the wall, so to speak. At pick number 22 for the Chicago Bears, I think edge rusher is key. Obviously, you brought Darrell Taylor there, so love that for you guys. And, Darrell Taylor, if I'm not mistaken, was from Tennessee. Let's go back. Let's go James Pierce here. Edge rusher out of Tennessee, 242 pounds. He just needs to put it all together. But, at this point, I think that he is well worth that 22nd overall pick. He is my number 32 player on my board. So to me, it's within perfect striking range. At 23 for the Miami Dolphins. This is a team where, obviously I love the idea of going someone like Tyler Booker, but it's just not an offense that I think values it much. When you look at the tight end group, I think Oscar Delp could be fantastic. He is both a good blocker, but also someone who is electric as a receiver. He is a mini Brock Bowers, not just because that's where he is, but it's where he learned from. So I do think that that is going to be a valuable asset on the squad. It's also just an interesting way to roll the dice in a different way than expected. Oscar Delp is going to be your new receiving threat on that squad. Number 24 for the Green Bay Packers. Pretty much the team that needs nothing, so best player available is probably the best option. However, I do think actually getting a future at boundary wide receiver is not an awful option at this point. And you got Alec Ayomanor. I can't say his name properly. Alec Ayomanor. I want to say Ayumanor. It's, I think, Iomanor, whatever the hell it is. He's somebody who is honestly pretty damn awesome and also kind of fits the Green Bay Packers motto of big dude, runs fast, and has potential to run routes and has pretty damn solid hands in contested catch scenarios. That's what I really love about his game. However, when we do want to look at some other positions, you do have that potential tackle question that I hope would be solved by this point. But looking at other positions that you could try to address, you could go best player available with Harold Perkins. I do think it's the best idea to trade back, though. I know it's boring, but trading back, Dayon Walker's available. And this is not crazy that he's here, by the way. People think that he should be a top 5 pick. The dude's pad level is way too high, and the fact is he's not NFL competent at the moment because of that. He's going to get destroyed by NFL offensive linemen. But if you can train him properly, he could be something special. I know defense interior is not the biggest need on planet Earth for the Packers, but when you can get someone super unique, you take them. You take them. That's the blessing of being able to have that good of depth, is being able to choose the most unique player on your board. For the Cowboys at 25, Harold Perkins to me kind of screams as an elite option for y'all. You look at the not tight ends. What the hell am I looking at? Wide receiver here, and you could go Io Manor, could go Bond, but you could also try to wait it out a little bit. And when you get Harold Perkins on the board, someone who also brings that edge rushing variant, I really do love the potential. It's not like I'm saying your linebacker core is cheeks, but you're getting someone who is a Swiss Army knife. And with CD having that deal, with also being able to select some more difference makers down the board at receiving position, maybe not at linebacker, I'm going to take my creative liberty and go after Harold Perkins Jr. here. Also disarming him from potentially, probably not, but potentially going to the Philadelphia Eagles, who are sitting at 26. Do they make the same mistake and go after a Georgia edge rusher that is underdeveloped in Mikael Williams? I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, it sounds scary, but I don't think it's a bad idea. For me, Princely Umamulin could be a great choice. Shamar Turner, somebody who I do want to toss in there as well. Princely does bring some good size to him as well, and he is very flexible. But I do think that you have to swing on the upside of Mikael. He's a freak athlete with great length, and he's going to be testing out really well. And unlike Nolan, he is 30 pounds heavier. It's not like Nolan is small. Statistically, he might be smaller, but you look at how he's physically built, he's not small. Mikael Williams will bring the heat, though. I really do want to bring him into the fold, bring a top-tier edge rusher presence when you're losing Sweat and probably BG. 27 for the Detroit Lions, edge rusher, wide receiver. Those are the positions I'm looking at. Theoretically, linebacker with Kaiser as well. I will be going after the edge rusher route most likely at this spot with Princely Umamulan because I do think he gets a lot of crap for being a much better edge rusher than the majority, if not all of these guys above him. I do think this guy is really special and just needs to be more consistent than anything. And this team does need a true edge too. We're going to be going after our guy, Princely Umamulan. At 28 for the Bengals, this is going to be where we're going to see a run on guards, I think, because I know that it's not like the biggest issue for the Bengals to solve, but it sure as hell is the best value. And Tyler Booker is just pretty much a home run hit, and I don't want the Ravens to have their choice of top-tier guards and such. And Tyler Booker could play tackle if you wanted him to. So we're going to be going after an elite interior offensive lineman. The thing is protect, protect, protect. It helps out the run game, helps out the pass as well. 29 for the Bills. I honestly want to trade out of this spot. I do, because my thing is also deplete the options for the Ravens who are going to be drafting Roberts or Jackson. And let's see, maybe a team, theoretically, if Trey Smith could be on the market, you could see the Chiefs trying to make a move up here. They have done a deal with the Bills before. But if we were to address the teams that are sitting at these spots, the Bears could be trying to boost their offensive line. Tevin Jenkins is coming up on a new deal. They just acquired that boost in their draft capital as well. Is this the right opportunity to potentially try to make a quick move up here? And I think the value right here, 54 to 61 for a 4-spot jump, you could end up tossing some extra goodies in here if you'd like. But I think that's perfectly valid. Maybe you could end up flipping it here, but do that on your own, man. I mean, I'm not going to do it for you, but like maybe you could end up tossing this in here and you can get like a pick 169 or 136 for that matter and balance out the increase in pick value. Do your own math. I'm not going to do it right now. We're going to get the pick through. We're going to make the trade up with Chicago, and we are going to draft our left guard, who could even be a left tackle here, in Donovan Jackson, leaving the Ravens with a top-tier guard option in Jaden Roberts. However, Jaden Roberts is more raw than the other two guys I just mentioned. However, he has the highest ceiling of the three guards. So we're going to be going after Jaden Roberts here because they need to go after offensive line. I think it's going to be paramount to this team's success. And at pick number 31 for the Niners, it also depletes them of a potential right tackle development. So Jonas Savania feels like a pretty smart option for the Niners. It just makes a ton of sense. You could look, I'm not going to look into the edge core because you guys are kind of like patching it up right now, but it doesn't really feel like that's going to be your primary motive. I think offensive line is the key here. And I'm going to go Arianti Urzuri. He's a left tackle, so it's not going to be someone who starts right away. But you also do see that Trent Williams wants a brand new contract. Are you going to be able to pay that to him with Brock Purdy coming up? Probably. But he's also getting older. And Arianti Urzuri, to me, as when I was watching him, I literally texted the head scout of y'all's, RJ Gillen, ended up saying, like, dude, Arianti Urzuri is literally right up your alley. So I think that he's going to be a 49er when it comes. It probably might not be in the first, but it could be undoubtedly one of their picks of the first two rounds. And at pick 32 for the Chiefs, defensive interior, I think is super smart to target here. Tyleik Williams, Walter Nolan, both these guys are fantastic. Bear Alexander, you could mention all these dudes. They're all fantastic. It makes ending off the draft really easy for me because I could have taken these guys earlier and I still would have been happy. But that's going to be the pick. So these are going to be the results. I'll scroll down so you guys get a quick little recap there. Let me know what you think. Obviously, it's way too early, so we're still having a lot of fun here. But thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you on the far side.